Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the April 23rd, 2014 meeting of the Lowell Conservation Commission. If I can remind you, if you have any cell phones or devices that make noise, kindly turn them off or to silent. If they go off during the meeting, you will be asked to leave. The agenda, we have 3 public hearings on the agenda tonight. I'm going to, just to let you know, I'm going to be taking them in reverse order. So first item on the agenda tonight is a notice of intent, Kevin Stewart, concerning DEP file number 2060726. The project location is 97 Tanner Street, and it's to install Jersey barriers, chain link fence, and gravel within 100 feet of a buffer zone and bank of the River Meadow Brook.
Good evening, I'm Stephen Erickson from North Environmental.
And Attorney Curtis, if you could identify yourself for the record, please.
Attorney Gregory Curtis here on behalf of Kevin Stewart also.
The plans in front of you are the same plans that we submitted. The only difference is that they've got colors on them. You can see the buffer zone is shown in yellow, 100-foot buffer zone from the bank of the river. We've got a riverfront area, the 25-foot, that's in a light purple color there. And we're showing what we're planning to do is put some Jersey barriers across the back of the property so nobody inadvertently backs into that area. Silt fence and hay bales and behind that, and we would put a gravel or crushed stone layer in front of that. The reason for the crushed stone is just to slow the velocity of any runoff that goes into that area so that anything comes out before it does get into that zone. There were comments from the department asking about invasive plants on the site. The only invasive plants are the ones that are growing on the bank of the brook. That's Japanese knotweed. As you're aware, it's almost impossible to get rid of. I would have to excavate it all out of there or give it repeated doses of Roundup right next to the water, neither of which is a really good solution. We have no other invasive plant species on the site. The site is pretty much bare. It's been used for used cars in the past, and it will be used for a towing area now. We'll be putting chain link fence around the entire boundary that will have slats within it. And that's it. It's a pretty simple project. We're staying out of the riverfront area. We're staying out of the flood zone. We're just doing some light work within the buffer zone.
All right, when you say it's going to be used for vehicle storage, what
The company is a towing company, and they tow cars.
Okay.
And that will be a storage area for those vehicles.
What, under contract for municipalities? Is
Yes,
that
under
okay.
contract from the municipality.
so this is
not
like
a junkyard. This is taking towed vehicles and storing them.
So these will be vehicles that are either in service or for some reason had to be towed?
Yes.
They won't be wrecks from accidents and stuff?
No.
Okay. So
Basically, Mr. Stewart has a contract with the city of Lowell to tow. Also has a contract with the Massachusetts State Police, so he tows on the Lowell Connector, 495, Route 3, and also for the city of Lowell. Most of the time, these vehicles are towed. They're there for a short period of time. People come down and bail them out and pick them up. But this site previously was, a Class 3 license, and that was a dismantler's license. So this is nothing that we're going to be proposing. All this will be is towed vehicles behind a screened-in fence, and usually the cars are coming and going on a daily basis after people. Some of them may be there for several days, but most of the time they're picked up recently.
now, what's the purpose of the Jersey barriers is to prevent damage to the fence and pushing anything over the bank?
There's a steep slope on the edge of the bank, so it'll be 2 things. It'll prevent anybody from accidentally driving that way, and it'll act as a barrier to any erosion or siltation that happens to go through that area. It's just a simple barrier. It's only about 49 feet long in that area.
All right. The The bank now, is, from what I understand, is somewhat vegetated.
Heavily vegetated with Japanese knotweed.
Yeah, I mean, it would be an ideal time at this time, as you characterized it, you know, it's a 50-foot-long bank to remove those invasives.
If you look at the property line on that plan, you will see that our property line doesn't extend all the way to the river. We only have a small strip that has the invasives in it, and the rest of that isn't owned by us. We don't have control over that area. So the invasives would still be there. If I leave any of them there, there's no way I can control Japanese knotweed. I just can't do it.
All right. What is, to your knowledge, Mr. Erickson, being a wetland scientist, are there any native species that could be, assuming you could eradicate that isolated area, any native species that would suppress reintroduction of the knotweed?
None. The knotweed was introduced in the early 1900s for erosion control. It works great for that. Unfortunately, it just grows so dense, it chokes out all of the native species. We had come up with a plan. We were working in the city in Lawrence, and we actually came up with a plan to make a riverfront area better. And we found a method to inject the Roundup into the stems. And you have to hire a licensed herbicide applicator in order to do that. But it looked great because we could confine it to the plants, and after a few times we might be able to get everything out. But it turned out, unfortunately, if we follow the directions, we can only use a specific amount of the herbicide per acre, and it would have allowed us to do 8 stems. So it was a great idea, but it simply doesn't work.
All right, the only other comment that I have is the chain, how tall is the chain link fence?
I'm sorry?
How tall is the chain link fence?
8 feet.
Okay. Is there any plan to screen that or to put some sort of screening?
It's going to be slatted. It'll have the final slats in between it.
Okay, just because I'd like to keep, just as a visual buffer, it's not really a jurisdictional issue, but just as a visual buffer, since it's going to, I would imagine that this is going to be a moderately trafficked area, meaning there'll be a couple of vehicles coming in and out at all times of the day and night. I would imagine your business is probably picks up a little at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, as the bars let out, and just the having the noise and having the lights shining into the resource area and disturbing the fauna that uses that corridor for passage. And again, this is an existing use currently. I know Tanner Street's a heavily industrial area, but as you know, there is a project in the works to clean up that corridor.
Right, and we're also, on Monday, we're going to be going for the Board of Appeals for a special permit on this same matter, because it requires a special permit. So we wanted to come, of course, before conservation first. Just on another note, most of the land down there that is behind our land, between our land and the canal or the riverway, is owned by the city. So I don't know if there's some way that the city could get involved if, this area is going to be eradicated from weeds. Majority of the land is a parcel that's owned by the city of Lowell.
The city's very well aware of the invasives that are there, and I would suggest, Swati, through you to, to maybe develop coordinate efforts to do that and to eradicate the knotweed and to reintroduce, blueberry bushes, something that will provide great stabilization to the bank, as well as, as well as suppressing reintroduction of invasives. There's as you know, Mr. Erickson, and Mr. Curtis, whether you know or not, there's a pretty big push right now in conservation commissions and conservation areas to eradicate invasives. So
It would be nice to get rid of it, but unfortunately, even a half-inch root stem left will resprout.
yeah, and I get it. It's a constant battle, but it may take 1, 2, 3 years, but eventually it'll get there. It may not be next year that they're gone, but you know, the year following and the year following that. So there's a little bit of effort, you know, so. All right, I don't have any further questions. Commissioner Varner?
I was out at the site this afternoon, and the police actually let me in, so I was able to go to the back boundary there, but I'm a little confused by this plan. Is the silt fence that's out there in the same location as the proposed silt fence on this plan?
I'm not sure, I didn't measure it off, but I asked them to put that out there because when I first went out there to flag the wetland, it was evident that there was the potential for erosion. So I asked them to put the silt fence and the hay bales up there as a precautionary measure.
Well, there's a silt fence there. Now, these squares that are indicated to be an aluminum sheet fencing, is that correctly depicted on this plan?
On
as to
the
where they
right-hand side of the
end?
property?
Existing aluminum sheet fencing on the northeast side of the property.
Yes.
And it shows the silt fence just before the end of that aluminum sheet fencing on this plan.
To the best of my knowledge, that's accurate.
So when I was standing at the silt fencing, I was looking down and the water was right there. So I don't understand why you have the green wetland line, what the scale is on this. You have it approximately 30 feet beyond. I was looking down at the river, and it was an extremely steep slope, which I don't see depicted on this plan either. As you said, it drops right off. And, you know, the disturbed area was right up to what I would consider the vertical bank of the brook. And at the top of that vertical bank was the silt fencing. So the wetland line, as far as my memory of the site, and it only goes back a couple hours here, the wetland line on the near side of the brook isn't depicted on this plan. What you have depicted looks like the wetland line on the far side of the brook.
The wetland line, to be completely accurate, should have been lower, but when I did the flagging, it was snow-covered, and it's a steep slope, and the only way I could have gotten them down lower is if I'd used a kayak.
But
So it's
you
a very
must have
conservative wetland
crossed the
boundary.
water to put wetland flags where you have them depicted on this plan. You must have walked across the ice or something.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
It's just my visual feeling that the wetland line should be right where the words Zone AE appear, right in that area. And that's not where they are on this plan. My concern is this. I walked in there, it looked like the site had been recently graded within perhaps the last month. There was a lot of loose material there. These 105 contours were not in evidence, so I'm thinking that perhaps that material was pushed around. There was loose material going right up to the silt fence, which makes me feel that, you know, some work has been done in there before we had a chance to look at it. The material that's right up against the silt fence, I think, is the same. The site's perfectly flat to my eye. I'm not a surveyor, but it seems to be perfectly flat instead of dropping off to the rear the way this plan shows it. Now, if this plan is dated sometime back in March, my feeling is that somebody has pushed some things around in there, probably cleaning up the site, maybe.
It
Things
wouldn't
got
be
pushed
surprised me
around.
if they filled in some of the potholes.
It would what?
It wouldn't surprise me if they filled in some of the potholes, but I'm not aware of any work that was done on the property myself.
Well, the material was so loose that I went in up over the top of my shoes just walking through there. That's you know, that's loose material. That's not material that's been sitting for a while.
That's why we're looking for some crushed stone up against the edge, because it'll be a better barrier.
Well, my concern is that we don't have a buffer here. We don't have enough of a buffer at where you propose to put the Jersey barriers, the chain link fence, and the silt fence. that is right on top practically of what I would consider the wetland line, leaving no buffer at all. There are a few bushes and things along there. I didn't see a lot of knotweed, so I don't know whether there was some there that got pushed over when, in the course of pushing some material around. I did see some native species growing along that bank. I think the bank is stable. I'm not saying that the bank has been compromised, but I think what needs to be done is some of that loose material needs to be pulled back a little bit and leave more of a buffer there. If anything happened to any of those shrubs that are still left, and there's no room for any kind of a landscape buffer there at the present time with what you're proposing. So if something happens to the native plants that are growing out there, there could be a great deal of erosion occurring on that slope. It's an extremely steep slope. Probably, the water's probably 10 feet below the level of the silt fence area. So what I think needs to be done is you need to pull back a little bit there to allow for a strip for planting some additional, hopefully native species, trees and shrubs, and then proceed with your fence and your Jersey barriers, perhaps. But I think it's very tight right through there.
It's a disturbed area now. We're making it better. And even if I try to plant stuff in there, the knotweed is just going to take it over. I don't see any advantage to putting additional plantings there.
I didn't see a lot of knotweed out there. I know it dies down, but I didn't see a lot of it right along that stretch right there.
Perhaps if I can interject, because I'm looking at this map and I get what Commissioner Varnum's saying, and I think you're basing it on this last visual reference that's shown on the plan. But the description I'm getting now is that there's a steep bank there, but it doesn't look like there's steep topography there shown on the plan at all until you get closer to the where the green line is for the wetland flagging. So maybe either the plan doesn't show the fence going out all the way, that it does. I don't know. It may be worth a second look to reconcile that. But from the gradients that are shown on the plan before us, it looks like that flat-ish feature extends out beyond the property line. Your property line is shown on the plan. What, Attorney Curtis, I mean, are you familiar with the site at all?
Somewhat, yes.
All right, did you do the title work on it, or?
Yes.
All right, did the property line showing, the south 34, 59, 54 west, that's the subject property line, correct?
Right.
All right, so,
Yeah, 43 feet, 42, 43.42, that's the back property line. The rest of that in the back is the city of Lowell.
now, does your client, does he own, like, to the steep portion of the bank, or is his property line stopped before the steep portion of the bank?
We're pretty much at the top
Yeah,
of the bank.
Right.
So you're not on the steep portion of the bank?
I thought the steep portion of the bank started where the flag riverfront is, where those flags are. I thought that was where it started to drop off, because I'm looking at elevations of 101, then 103, and 104, so you don't have that steep of a grade until you get right to the riverbank, and that's not our property. That property is either the city of Lowell or Burke and Carroll that has a parcel.
Mr. Erickson, who did the, I'm assuming the plan was done for you.
It's on the ground survey, yes.
Yeah, does that fence that runs along the northeast side that Commissioner Varnum was talking about, does that extend out to the back of the property line?
It doesn't, I don't think it goes all the way back, but it goes pretty far back.
Because I mean, Commissioner Varnum, it sounds to me, was using that last poll as a visual reference as to where things were. But, you know,
I
maybe,
didn't try to verify the accuracy of that. I just assumed that the surveyor located the end of the aluminum sheeting. But I didn't go out there.
yeah, but
and take
from
logs.
what I'm hearing tonight, though, and I think you may get that, it doesn't sound like they're reconciling with each other. There's an observation by Commissioner Varnum that she's at the end of that area and looking right down into the water, whereas from what I'm looking at on the plan, it looks like there's another 20 feet or so before you get to the bank at the end of that aluminum sheeting. So, the two don't seem to be reconciling with each other right now.
I'm not sure about the location of the fence, but the work that we're proposing is in the area that's flat and disturbed right now. We're staying on the top of the slope. We're not going near the slope. That was the intent of this to begin with.
What I would make, let me suggest this. Would it be possible? Well, actually, it actually would be possible. And what I'll suggest is, why don't we put some stakes? Put some stakes out there as to exactly where you're going to be putting the fence and the Jersey barriers, and stake either end. And
If you wanted us to move it 5 feet further out away, I don't think that we'd have a problem with that. If you put it
I
in a lot of
don't think it's a
conditions.
question, and I think right now it's a question of just identifying.
Yeah, I think the visual is that the
Where it
aluminum
is.
fence goes further down than the property line. So when you're looking at it, as you're out there today, you're looking at this fence that is protruding further than the property line. So I guess eventually, it's going to be a brand-new fence all the way around. It's going to be exactly on the property line, or just within maybe 6 inches in from the property line.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, Attorney Curtis, but the plan doesn't show that. And you see what I'm getting at? The visual reference that Commissioner Varnum was using as the last post is like, 10, 15 feet in, to the northeast on your plan. And if there's in fact more posts out, further out towards the River Meadow Brook area, then, the plan is either incomplete or omitted some of the.
It's possible that there's
Yeah,
an incursion
so-
on encroachment on the other piece of
Yeah,
property.
I
don't
think
know.
there is an encroachment there, but I'm looking at the last, looks like the last post is right at the AE line, the zone AE, when it comes across.
Right.
That looks like the last post of the current aluminum fence, which is not even on the property. I don't know how the distance is between there and the edge of the steep slope. I don't,
Right, where Commissioner Varnum is saying that she was standing at the last post looking right down into the water. So,
If you look at the aerial, it shows that the post is right at the water.
yeah, there
So I
may be,
think that post on the right, it might have should have extended more to the
there
wetlands.
might be another, then there may be another post that is further down, because I'm looking at where the flags are for the flagged riverfront. That should be the edge of the actual water, or the steep slope going down to the water.
to me, the simplest solution is drive a couple stakes into the ground, exactly where the Jersey barriers are gonna be and the fence is gonna be, and,
We didn't have a problem staking it out. That's not a problem.
yeah, and that way, when we go back to look at it, we know exactly where it's gonna be, and it resolves it.
Yeah.
Just a delay that we would like to avoid.
Yeah, no, I get it.
So,
I get it, but right now, I mean, I was okay with it, but right now, what I'm hearing is that, this activity is gonna be literally right on top of the resource. And we can't permit that, because you're in the riverfront area, and as those are no disturb zones. We couldn't
deliberately-
even give you a permit if we wanted to, so,
We deliberately put it outside of the riverfront area.
yeah.
That was the design.
So, I mean, I think that, you're probably outside that area now, but just put a couple stakes in the ground so we know where you're gonna be, and,
That's not a problem. We can stake that
and
have
it's
it back
easy
out.
to resolve, so.
Come back out and review it once it's staked, exactly where it is in relation to the property line and where these Jersey barriers are planning on being placed. If they have to be moved in or out a little bit, at your request, we can certainly do that.
All right,
But even if, you know, your property line is determined, I think we should look at it from the point of having a wider buffer between that top of bank and your activity area. And, you know, there's quite a few aggressive plants that could be planted there that aren't necessarily expensive, such as forsythia or something like that, that might be able to hold its own against the knotweed should it come back. But I didn't see a lot of knotweed there. I saw buckthorn and maple and things like that.
You're talking about in that zone AE, so if,
Talking about that, well, now I'm confused about where that is. Wherever the top of bank is, I think you need to have a strip that's on the same level as your activity
Right.
that's vegetated, not just a bank that's vegetated.
okay,
So that might mean, you know, pulling back to make room for some kind of vegetation, and I don't know how wide that strip
Side of
might
the-
necessarily be.
in this area. All right. That, I think once we get it staked out, we know exactly where that location is, that certainly could be a possibility, because on the flat area, I think it'll be easier to put some plantings. We're not gonna be using that area at all. We're gonna stop well before that, where those Jersey barriers are, so it's a narrow area. We're talking 49 feet. It's, compared to the rest of the lot, if there needs to be some plantings, and we have to identify exactly where that zone is at the level that is consistent with the grade of the property. Once it gets to the riverbank, that's where it drops off steeply.
I'd
And that's the
prefer not
city's
to
problem.
disturb the riverbank with
No, I don't-
plantings, but if you could put some on the flat
On the flat,
top of the bank.
that can be done.
Commissioner Lovely? Commissioner Lynch?
I'm good, thank you.
Commissioner Beardron?
Nope.
All right. Is there anyone here who would like to offer their comments or concerns regarding this project? Is there anyone here who'd like to offer their comments or concerns? Is there anyone here who'd like to offer their comments or concerns? Okay, hearing none. I'm not, do we have a DEP? We do, but at your assent, Attorney Curtis, what I'd like to do is continue this to the next hearing.
That's fine.
Mr. Erickson, you think you can get some stakes in the ground so we, in due haste, so, you know, over the next couple days? All right, so, you know, I'm not really going to, I don't think we need to schedule a site visit. This is pretty simple stuff, actually. But, so, you know, when we go back out, if you could send Swati an email or a phone call to let her know so we know when we can go out and
Okay,
take a
what's the
look at it.
date of the next meeting, 2 weeks from?
No, it's a couple weeks.
May 14th?
May 14th?
May 14th,
Yeah,
okay.
it's, so, and I understand this is a secure lot?
It's secure, but if you want to get down there, we can contact the owner. It's a fenced-in lot,
Yeah.
so they just don't want people walking out there, but we certainly can open it up at any time you'd like. Maybe
Okay.
I could call the commission, or they could call my office, or Mr. Erickson. Someone's down in that area all the time, so we can get down there in 10 or 15 minutes.
All right, and, you know, to address some of Commissioner Varnum's, you know, if you could, you know, if you're not going to be using that area, then pull it inboard a little bit, you know?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. If that could be pulled in a little bit, and there's a little bit of a flat area, and some vegetation could be planted in that flat area, that is going to be behind the Jersey barriers. It's never going to be disturbed by anyone on our end. But again, other than invasive weeds that are going to grow in that area, I think it would help with the buffeting. It'd also help shielding the fencing area a little bit from the wintertime when you're looking at it from the highway,
All right, okay, thank
other
you.
than the people that are living on the highway. But I think they're slowly getting rid of those situations.
Yeah. All right, do I have a motion to continue at the
I'll make a
request of the
motion to
applicant?
continue this to the next
Seconded
meeting.
by Commissioner Beardron, seconded by Commissioner Lynch. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is Leslie and Albert Casey, 98 Columbia Road, concerning DEP file number 2060727. Project location is 98 Columbia Road, and it's to approve the placement of a deck within the 100-foot buffer of a bordering vegetated wetland.
Again, I'm Stephen Erickson from North Environmental. Our clients had installed a gap to the rear of their property, to the rear of their dwelling. They're looking to market the house, looking for a closing as quickly as possible. There were no permits for the deck, so the commission had requested that we file a notice of intent for that. We had flagged the wetland out there. It's all lawn right to the edge of the wetland. The closest portion of the deck, the stairs, is 32.5 feet away. It's a relatively flat area, not much of a slope. There has been no alteration of the resource area itself, and we're just looking to get through this so we can market the property free and clear.
And this abuts up to all of that flooding that's out behind in that ponding area that's part of the Flaggy Meadow, right?
Right, there is no floodplain shown on this property. I'm sure the water comes up a little bit, but there's no floodplain shown in this particular area.
Yeah, okay, well, there's another thing, and when I saw the plan, kind of hit me in the face. What about the shed?
When they put the shed there, they got a building or went down to see if they needed a building permit. It's under 120 square feet, so it doesn't require a building permit. So they installed the shed there, it's just sitting on blocks.
Yeah, well, it requires a conservation permit, though, so.
If we could include that with this, we would appreciate that.
What's in the shed?
It's just storage for tools, yard tools.
Are they homeowners here?
Yes, they are.
All right, if one of you could approach, please, and just identify yourself for the record, Mr. Casey.
Yep. Albert Casey.
Do you have a garage, sir?
A garage? No.
No? All right, and I'm assuming you store like lawnmowers and
Snow blower, lawnmower,
gas can
hand
and
tools.
stuff like that in there?
Yeah.
Okay. I know it's a grassy area back there, established lawn and whatnot. Okay.
I came to City Hall and they told me a 10 by 12 shed, you didn't need a permit. I wasn't aware of the wetlands
Yeah, well, how many years ago was that?
5 years ago.
Yeah, and things have changed for the good, but that wouldn't have happened more recently, so. And it unfortunately for folks like you, it happened all the time, so. You know, you told you don't need this permit and the other permits that you do need are in another building and whatnot, but, you know, the cities over the last several years have consolidated all of those offices, so all the permitting's sort of central now, and there's review by one or two people now, all, you know, depending on what the project is, so they're aware of all the various different permits that are now required, so. All right, I'm not seeing, I mean, to me, this is something that perhaps could have been done under a request for determination of applicability, but Commissioner Varnum?
I went out to look at this this afternoon, and the lawn is very well established. I didn't see any evidence of erosion. It's also fairly flat. It's a very gentle slope. And the wetland boundary also still has some vegetation of those grasses that aren't particularly loved, those tall grasses. The shed was up on blocks. It really was in no way attached. I mean, it could easily be moved if it needed to be. The deck was higher up than I believe any floodwater would come, but there was no evidence that the water had flooded up there. We had some fairly high water about a month ago. There was no evidence of this particular water area having come up and come up on the, towards the house. I didn't see a particular problem with this as far as encroaching on the wetland. This is an extremely small lot, now that I see the plan. You know, it's a very early subdivision. I'm not sure how many square feet, but it looks to me like the lawn is perhaps off the property. I don't know, according to this plot plan. So I don't think there's a whole lot of choice here as far as the shed goes as to where to move it. I think it's, the homeowners are in the process of moving to a cross-country tour, which I thought was interesting. They're traveling by van. And I would hate to delay them on this if they're, you know, good weather's coming. You know, alternative, take the deck down, but I don't see a point where it's probably 8 feet above any flood area, and it was in no way solid underneath. It was, you know, it's on, what is the support on that? Was it wooden?
Yeah, I have 6x6s under it and cement in the ground.
I would be in favor of permitting this after the fact in
All
this
right.
particular case.
Commissioner Lovely?
I would concur with Commissioner Varnum. I mean, it's an after-the-fact application. I mean, if this came before us earlier, it probably would have been going through a request for determination of applicability, and we would have probably, looking at the scope of the work, found it to be what we call a -3 determination, meaning that it's within the jurisdiction, you know, of the Wetlands Protection Act, but the amount of work is insignificant, and so therefore you wouldn't have had to go through the notice of intent process. So I would agree with Commissioner Martin. Let's try and just get this permitted after the fact so you can go ahead and close.
Commissioner Lynch?
No question.
Commissioner Beardron?
No comments.
Right. Mr. Erickson, a technical question or a procedural question for you. Is there a particular reason why you wanted an order of conditions as opposed to a negative determination, or?
It was suggested to me by Ms. Joseph that a notice of intent would be more appropriate because the work was done unpermitted, and we were looking for efficiency. In fact, I wanted to file the certificate of compliance at the same hearing, and she suggested we should do one thing at a time, and that seemed like a very reasonable suggestion to me. But we will be submitting a request for a certificate of compliance, and we'd like to get on for the next meeting for that.
All right, well, okay, now, what I'm getting at is, as you're probably aware, is we can treat this as a request for determination of applicability and issue a -3 determination.
If you'd like to do that, we would be very grateful.
All right, that's something that wouldn't bother you?
Doesn't bother me at all.
All right, does the city, Swati, do you have any concerns about that?
The only thing is we have a file number issued by DEP. So basically, we have to issue an order to basically respond to the notice of intent filing.
Is that something that's going to cause problems with the DEP? We've done this before, so
Okay,
this isn't this wouldn't be the first time we've issued a negative on a notice of intent.
Okay, so maybe we can include that as the approval for the notice of intent that, you know, this would have qualified for a -3 RDA, and hence it doesn't need to have a certificate of
Right.
compliance.
I mean, I don't want to delay the process for you. If you're comfortable with it, we can permit it and
We
accept.
could do the RDA if you have no problem with that. I can send a letter to DEP and to the city of Lowell withdrawing the notice of intent with the appropriate paperwork for the RDA tomorrow, and we will call it a day.
Yes, that's no problem.
All right. Is there anyone here who would like to offer their comments? Well, first of all, to the commission, is there any?
Or can you do order of conditions and then do a certificate of compliance tonight?
Yeah, we can do that too, but then there's an appellate period, and when are you leaving, sir? Well, actually, don't answer that question.
If you prefer to do that, to keep the paperwork clean, that would be fine. There is no appeal period. Well, there's an appeal period for the order of conditions, but that's just 10 days.
Yeah.
And it's not going to interfere with us.
Okay, are you anticipating coming back then in the next meeting for a COC then?
If you would issue it right now, I would not. If you require us to come back, we will. We did hold off on that. The request is ready to go in.
No, I meant in our May meeting, would you be coming in with a COC request?
Yes.
Okay, I mean,
Why don't we just do it all tonight? Because
yeah, I mean,
Not
we
for
can,
nothing,
we
these
can do,
gentlemen's
I was
paid.
just trying to simplify it for you. To me, it doesn't matter one way or another, but if it's gonna cause issues, with DEP, I mean, if they're gonna jump up and down and yell and scream, and
All right,
then
we'll
we're
have
back
it
to
in-
square one again, so.
We'll have the request in tomorrow, and we can put it off to the next meeting, get the certificate of compliance at the next meeting.
Okay, so we'll just treat this as an NOI filing.
Yeah, and we can issue the order tomorrow itself.
Yeah,
That keeps the
All right.
paperwork
okay.
and the
All
paper
right,
trail.
do I have a motion on this?
I'll make a motion to issue a standard of Lowell order of conditions.
All right, any further discussion? Well, actually, we have the motion. Is there anyone here who would like to offer their comments or concerns, either for or against this project? Is there anyone here who would like to offer their comments or concerns, either for or against this project? Is there anyone here who would like to offer their comments or concerns, either for or against this project? Hearing none, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
By Commissioner Beardron, seconded by
Second.
Commissioner Lynch. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. This is to close the public hearing.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Now on the motion by Commissioner Beardron to issue a Lowell Standard Order of Conditions, and that was seconded by Commissioner Varnum. Any further discussion from the commission?
I do want to say, when you come back for the certificate of compliance, we don't need a representative here. We can just
No.
vote on it.
No. Any, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. All right, good, done. Thank you. Moving on to the last public hearing of the evening, notice of intent continued from prior hearings, Paul Mercia, concerning DEP file number 2060701. Project location is 51 and 57 Shirley Avenue, and it's to construct a single-family dwelling, deck, crushed stone driveway, plantings, floodplain alteration, compensatory storage, and associated grading and utilities within and bordering land subject to flooding, the 100-year floodplain. And this, just for point of, is here for, under the City of Lowell ordinance only. And before you begin, identify yourself for the record.
My name is Stephen Erickson from North Environmental Services.
And what did you give us tonight?
The commission at the last hearing had requested a number of things. They asked for engineered, structural engineering plans showing how everything would be attached and how it will be constructed. Phelan Engineering has provided us with that. In addition, the commission asked for a profile of the regraded mound and that was provided on a separate sheet. And they asked for some clarification on the compensatory storage. There were some notes added on there that the sum includes the open cellar, the front stairs, the front deck columns, the rear deck stairs, et cetera. And we exceed the total compensation substantially. That was what the commission had requested. Oh, they also requested that we show the existing trees, and those are shown on the plan.
All right, just to preliminarily get this out of the way, are you in receipt of the April 22nd memorandum from the city engineer, Lisa DeMail?
We get that this afternoon.
All right, well, we're just getting these plans now. And I know some of them are dated last week, so. Are these the same as the ones we've already been in receipt of?
Yes,
Oh, all right, well, I asked you what we received tonight, and,
these are the same plans. The
Oh, all
only
right.
difference is that we
all
color
right,
in.
okay, well, you didn't tell,
front
you
one
didn't
so
tell me
We're all
that.
working with the same
All right,
sheet.
okay, I don't, when I get something handed to me, I'm assuming it's different, unless I'm assuming it's new.
My typical methodology is to color in one of the sheets so that we're all looking at the same colors, and if I'm up on the board, I can point to the colored portion so that we all recognize what it is.
All right,
So
good. Then,
you
then,
always get at
then,
least a reduced
for the
copy.
for the less filled in, just tell me that, because I know that you said that in the prior two hearings, but it's got to be done for each hearing, so.
Yep.
Okay.
It makes the process easier. Most commissions
All right.
appreciate it.
As do I, by the way, and I'm sure my colleagues up here do too. All right. Well, right now I'm going to defer Commissioner Varnum.
I'm looking at the foundation work plan here. I just had to have some questions. You have 12 typical pier and footing and 13 typical column section. Now, I'm assuming the pier are the ones that go down the middle, is that correct? And they're heavier duty than the columns?
No, each one is supposed to be a steel I-beam. They all have that H insignia on them. That is the typical cross-section of an I-beam, which is why they call it an I-beam.
Well, maybe
have
then
used
you
some
can
different
explain
terminology on it, but-
why we have two graphics here, if they're the same. We have one for piers and one for columns.
I don't see that. Where do you have
At the
that?
bottom left of the foundation plan.
It looks like an I-beam to me. I think you just may have used a different terminology, but the intent is to use the I-beams.
Well, they haven't been, have they? I just don't understand why there are two different drawings here. And if they are different, I'm wondering if that has been accounted for in your compensation figures.
They are not different.
Well, moving on from that, we have a reference here to a prefab home in one of the notes. Is this foundation one that, one that was drawn for a prefab home? Or is this drawn for your typical wood constructed home?
Standard wood frame construction.
It's wood frame, is one of the notes here. On the top right, it says W6 beams are removable once modular home is set.
It's not intended to be a modular home. I mean, there's no reason it couldn't be. There's not a whole lot of difference between the two.
Well, that's what I'm wondering about. You
What
know,
would be the
is there a
difference?
difference in the weight or the construction of a modular home versus a traditionally constructed home that would be relevant to this
Typically, a modular
foundation
home is
plan?
lighter than a stick-built house because it's moved over the roadways.
It's larger,
Lighter,
lighter.
yes.
Well, if it's lighter weight, I'm wondering if it needs a stronger support underneath.
If it had a lighter weight, it would
It-
need a less strong support
No,
underneath.
because it doesn't have the bearing strength of itself. Well, moving on from that then, we show some concrete here above grade on the, I should have mentioned that when we were looking at the other graphics on the columns. I believe you had the I-beams in your last plan extending down below grade. And now they appear to be above grade.
You'll note, he has a note on the plan. Pier is shown at 8-inch above grade for corrosion protection. Top of concrete pier can be installed at or below grade if base plate and column are galvanized or protected by other approved method.
So what are you
The
proposing?
intent is to put the sonotube concrete at grade or just below grade, and only the I-beam would be above. That
So
was the way we discussed this construction from the beginning of this project.
so the I-beam will be galvanized then?
Yes.
Now, there's a question about the size of those I-beams. As the city engineer seemed to note that there were two different sizes mentioned on the plan.
I don't know where she got that from. Do you know where it is?
Well, some of them say W8 and some of them say W12, I believe.
I looked for that and I couldn't see the reference to it.
Well, the top left, it mentions W8, and the top right, it mentions W12.
I see a number 12, but I don't see a W12, unless I'm missing something.
It's written on the line that indicates the beam, I believe.
You'll have to point that out to me. I don't see it.
Well,
Are you questioning the structural engineer's design? I don't understand.
what's that?
Are you questioning the structural engineer's design? I just don't understand.
I'm trying to understand his design. Was there any plan to have him come in here and explain this plan to us?
No,
'Cause you don't
he
seem,
doesn't know anything about the Wetland Protection Act. He's a good structural engineer, though, very good.
well, we have to know if this structure is one that's going to protect the resource.
I think that's within the jurisdiction of the building department.
Well, it has to come through conservation as well. Well, I have some other notes here, but I'll let someone else ask some questions now.
Commissioner Lovely?
I was just happening to look back to my notes from the last meeting, and I think, Mr. Erickson, you kind of covered the three things that we were looking for in terms of putting the existing trees on the plan, clarification of the flood storage calcs, and the third thing would be having the city engineer approval of the structural integrity of the building so that we wouldn't have a concern regarding the resource. I think the challenge we have right now is kind of a sequencing issue. Not being a geotechnical engineer, I think what we were hoping for was, at least speaking for myself, was we would have the city engineer's approval first, so similar to Commissioner Barnum's comments, we wouldn't be kind of questioning whether or not, it's hard for us to assess whether or not the proposed structure could have a potential impact on the resource without having that assurance. I mean, I guess one could put the burden on the engineer who stamped the plan, but he's got a lot of caveats in there and a lot of ambiguities that makes it really hard to see whether or not that he would stand behind a greater level of specificity that we're seeking, or at least the city engineer is seeking.
Commissioner Lovely, if I could just interrupt, I don't want to short circuit anything here, but I had asked you, Mr. Erickson, at the beginning if you had read the city engineer's comments, and you said you just got them today. And Commissioner Lovely just mentioned, I had a similar list of, of issues that we wanted addressed, and what I was going to get back to, and I don't want to beat around the bush, because we've beat this one to hell. But if you've reviewed the city engineer's comments, and to put it in plain English, she's not satisfied. She has open questions regarding the foundation.
If you want to continue and we can address these with
Yeah,
the city engineer, we
what
can do that.
what I'm well, I don't want to continue it right this second, because there's still some open issues, but what I was hoping to get back, and I think Commissioner Lovely was the same, Commissioner Varm, I don't want to speak for everybody, but what I was hoping to get back was something from the city engineer's office saying, what you're proposing out there is something that we can work with and permit. And what I'm looking at from the comments from the city engineer is, no way. What you're proposing is what we're going to approve. There's too many contradictions and too many open questions right now.
Well, a lot of her questions don't really make a whole lot of sense, like the condition of the erosion controls. We don't have any erosion controls.
Well, I'm not talking about erosion control. I'm talking about her specific comments with respect to the foundation, the footings, the pads, the beams. And I'm not a structural engineer. I'm not the city engineer. I don't know my W8s from my W12s. And I'm going to defer to the experts. And what the city expert is telling me is no. Okay? That's
wanna
what I'm
continue
getting
for us
out
to
of,
address
that's what
that.
I'm getting out of this memo. Okay?
If you want to continue, we can address that. I'll let the structural engineer send a letter directly to Lisa DeMayo.
Well, I want the city engineer to be satisfied that what you're proposing out there to meet one of our conditions, that what you're gonna be putting out there is something that the city's gonna permit for a building permit and a foundation permit. Okay, and right from what I'm reading from the city engineer is, no. So, to put it in plain English, and back to you, Commissioner Lobo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. While we're here, I guess I'm looking at the last plan from the last hearing and this one. With regard to the flood storage compensation, I think there was some math errors, or it was just hard to make sense out of the last plan, but looking at it, you had a total displacement of about a little over 30 cubic feet in the last plan, and now it's 31 cubic feet. But that being said, the total and I think the other issue was whether or not you could take credit for that mounded area, correct? Wasn't that?
Yes.
So if you could just, at least for my benefit, what's different, maybe just explain this a little bit more further in terms of the flood storage calcs. What's a little bit different from the last plan? If I'm reading it correctly, you didn't take credit for the mound in this plan, and yet you still have more flood storage than what you're taking up with the proposed sonnet tubes, correct?
No, he did take credit for the mound.
Okay. So you did take credit for the mound, and so was it a matter of just then clarifying that the calculations are correct?
He just added the phrase, if I remember correctly, he just added the part includes the open cellar, and includes the front stairs, includes the front deck columns, includes the rear deck columns, etc.
Okay. And wasn't there some ambiguity at the time as to whether or not that mound was all within that property?
Yes, the mound is not entirely within the property. Part of it is on the adjacent property.
But in terms of what they're taking credit for, is it just the portion that's within their property?
He's only taken for the proportion that is on our property.
Okay.
He's got a profile shown on the third plan.
Okay. And I guess I would just, at this point, just echo what, the chairman said. At this point, I think it'd just be premature to discuss this further until we hear back from the city engineer. And I certainly, for one, would feel more comfortable having a conversation about this after we resolve the issue of the integrity of a structure within the resource area. No further comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Lynch?
I don't have any additional questions. I just agree with the commissioners and what they said. There are significant comments here by the city engineer's office, so I think addressing those, because you even stated that some of her comments were a little confusing, so I think just sitting down with her and smoothing these out would help us, and then we could get the confidence that they're on board with this proposal, and then we can make our decision based on that.
Some parts are confusing, like she talks about pouring concrete and groundwater. We don't have groundwater there.
Right, so I
it's-
think talking with her definitely would be beneficial for
Yeah.
you to just understand sort of where she's coming from too, so.
We can do that. And concrete, by the way, can be poured in water and will settle a lot slower, but it actually comes out stronger.
Could I interject?
Yeah.
You said there was no groundwater there?
We're not going to be hitting the groundwater. There is groundwater somewhere out there and virtually everywhere
I
in
thought
New
you had not done
England.
any test pits. I asked you that at another hearing, that you hadn't done any test pits on this site.
We haven't done any test pits on the site, no.
So you don't know what the material is that's
Well, I do
down
know what the
there, and you
material
don't know
is.
where the water table is.
I can give you a very good idea. It's going to be at
No, I
least
don't
4
want a good
feet and
idea. I'd
probably
like-
8 feet because of the
I'd-
type of
I'd like
soil
to
it is,
see a
and I can
test
tell you
pit.
exactly what the soil I'm going to find is going to be. And if you want a test pit out there, I don't have a problem doing a test pit. It's just that this is a moving target. Every time I come in, there's something else.
It was your engineer here that brought up the fact about you need to know where the water table is and what the bearing of the soil is and what type of soil it is, and that organic soil would not be appropriate. So I
There
think
is no
it's
organic soil there
something that
either.
you should be looking
Commissioner
at.
Varnum has the floor.
I think it's something that you should be curious about as to what's down there under the surface.
Commissioner Beardron?
If we are really concerned about the groundwater, would it make sense for you to just auger down? Because you can auger down about 4 feet and just see. If
I'm
you hit
sorry, could you
water-
repeat that?
Since we are so concerned about the groundwater, could you just auger down a few feet and see if you do hit water? You could do that by hand.
I could auger down 3 to 4 feet in this material. It's all sand. This is what's called a windsow soil.
Yeah, well, because your bottom of your footing is about 4 feet below, and you think the water's around 4 feet.
Below 4 feet.
So you could auger between now and next meeting and let us know what you got.
I could do that, yes.
Okay. On the computation of the storage, I'm just a little confused in the table for elevations 91 through 94. There is no volume in there. But then we do have some concrete footing in those elevations. So I would think that there should be some loss of storage in those elevations.
There's a gaining of that storage. There's a little bit of removal of material toward the back.
This table, like, I'm getting confused and I'm an engineer, so, like, you have the contour intervals, which is good, that's what you should have. Then you have this displaced volume in 2 columns. And I guess I don't need cubic feet. Like, what are these cubic feet? Is that just the cubic feet in that interval that he's calculated?
Yes. So for example, it says the rear deck columns from 94 to 95, 1.22 cubic feet and 0.3.
So he's saying in those 2 feet, that's
Yes.
how many per column?
Right.
Okay. And then,
And we're not, the only thing we're doing below 94 is removal of material. And he doesn't show the actual removal below the floodplain elevation.
but you have, on over here, you have top of concrete footing 91.5 and bottom of concrete footing 95. So I think that there should be some sort of loss of flood storage in the 91-90 contours.
Perhaps I can, that's below grade, so that's already under grade, so it's.
That's correct, the footing is below grade. There's no loss of
The
compensatory
lowest
storage
elevation
below
that they're,
grade.
the lowest elevation that they're filling on the site is 94.
We don't care about that?
No, not below grade, so.
The regulations do not require compensatory storage for below-ground structures.
Even if it's a permanent change?
Yeah,
Even if it's a
it's
permanent
already,
change.
it's already considered filled, so.
Okay. And then also, the town engineer did say she was confused with the W8, W12 I-beams. I had the same question, because sometimes it says it's a W8, the other times it says it's a W12. Also, you have 12 I-beam columns in the table, and I keep counting 14. I don't know if I'm missing, or maybe the 2 middle ones are different? Because in the table, it says 12 I-beam columns. I don't know if that should be 14, which would increase that cubic footage.
We will check that.
And then, will you be updating the notice of intent? I don't have the notice of intent copy in front of me. Should it be being updated with these changes, or
I'm sorry?
the notice of intent, will we be getting a new revision, or are we not asking for that?
Yeah,
Like, where are we at with this permit?
yeah, I'd like to see the plan that the DEP approved for the state side on this, because betwixt and between, those two ultimately need to be reconciled too.
Sure.
Is that what you're looking for, Commissioner?
Yeah, because
Beaver?
I think in the notice of intent that this table will be in there, and it'll be a little bit more simple for me to kind of understand. Because I'm having like a hard time, there's just kind of text that's floating around there, and it would just be easier to just kind of see that laid out somewhere.
It's not clear to me how you want it laid out.
Well, I understand like what you did here, but again, you might have 14 columns when you have 12. I don't really understand, like, I would like to see that, or at least I would say, okay, this is my average that I got per this, and this is how I'm giving you this, because it's just kind of thrown numbers. You have like 9.48 CF I-beams, 1.65 columns, 20 stairs, ETC, I don't know what any of that means. For a total displaced of 31.13 cubic feet total, like, what is that? It's just kind of floating around in the middle.
Which part are you reading?
Under the table,
Okay.
just, I guess everything under that table, I think is just confusing. You have a total over here, and then another total, and then actually 4 totals, I don't even know what those totals are. And then a little bit above, you have a sum, and then under that, you have an addition of total displaced. And then you have some words over here of saying what other numbers include, and it's just not really easy to read. And I understand it's hard to fit everything on an AutoCAD sheet, but I would assume in a notice of intent, that would kind of read a little bit better to be easy to understand. Unless you can explain all these right now to us. I just don't know what they are.
I will ask the engineer to try to address it.
Okay. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what, I'm getting confused. And then also, one of the engineer's comments, if you were to hit water, how would you address that? We should have maybe some sort of dewatering plan?
I'm sorry, dewatering?
Well, if you were to hit water,
We're
how
not-
would you address that?
We're not gonna hit water.
You keep saying that, but we need to know that for sure.
We'll do a test hole and
Okay.
find the water table,
Okay.
and I will put a bet on you that we don't have water within 6 or 8 feet
Okay.
of the surface.
So you will auger down and come back to us?
Yes.
Could you do a few spots, like 4? How about the 4 corners of the house?
What about the 4 corners of the house?
Could you auger down and see where if there's water?
It's all sand.
I know, but still.
One test hole in the center of the lot would be more than sufficient to tell us where the water is all over the property.
I still would like 4 on the corners. And then also, why, the city engineer said that this project is subject to the Mass DEP stormwater standards. Does the notice of intent not address those?
I missed that also, please. I apologize, my hearing is not great.
Oh, no, the Mass DEP stormwater standards?
Yes.
That checklist for the are you not addressing that in the notice of intent?
We don't come under the stormwater standards as a single-family dwelling.
Okay,
Mr. Mayo seems to think we come under the local, and I'm not sure about that. I'll check that. But we do not come under the Massachusetts DEP stormwater management standards.
and no single homes do?
None.
Okay,
It has to be 4 or 5 or more dwellings.
it has to be what?
4 dwellings or less are not covered under the stormwater management handbook.
Okay. 4 individual dwellings?
Yes.
Okay. I'm good.
All right, just as a point of, so we're not coming back on forth in this again, some corrections on your plans. And I think Commissioner Beardron touched on this, but beyond all the comments, your flood storage and filling calculations reference 12 I-beams, and your map shows 14. Or the plan detail shows 14, so I don't know what happened to the other 2. Are they, do they not fill anything? But you have to address that. The second is Commissioner Varnum asked about the footings to the beams, and you're placing them on 20-inch sonotube columns, which are indicated the concrete was to be at or below grade, but your plan detail shows them 8 inches above grade.
That's why he's in the reference note saying that if it's below grade, he would.
Well, the reference notes say that, but the detail shows them and in fact identifies them as being 8 inches above grade. So that's fill in the floodplain. That's not being identified on the
I thought it was clear when I
So-
read it, but
So the note has to be reconciled with the detail because there's two different things being shown.
Can I add one more thing? The bottom floor elevation is at 94.5, and existing ground is 94. Is that correct? I just want to make sure if the bottom floor elevation is sticking up above existing ground, that is also taken account.
where he's saying the bottom floor elevation is 194.5 is simply a slab that's underneath the structure at grade.
Okay, so,
It's just an at-grade slab, so it could be used for storage. It can't be used for a living area. And it's not intended to be used for a living area or for a garage.
All right, any further questions from the commission at this time? All right, what I'm going to do is open it up. This hearing was continued at the request of formal request from the Pawtuckaville Citizens Council, PCC. So is there anyone here who would like to offer their comments or concerns either for or against? And again, speaking tonight is not going to preclude speaking at any further hearings. It's just if we could limit our comments tonight to what's being addressed tonight, well, actually, I'm not going to limit it to what's being addressed tonight, but let's try and keep it focused though on established issues. We're fine with, but let's limit it to what we can do to go forward, and addressing the outstanding issues still. And again, if you haven't spoken, that's fine, and if you have spoken, that's fine too. But okay, but I don't want to rehash issues that have already been addressed. That's, I guess, would be the easiest way to say it. So if you could kindly identify yourself for the record.
Linda Ignacio, I'm the property owner of 66 Shirley Avenue, and the house was built in 1910. I've owned the property since 1976, and the problem, I'm not against building, I'm against building in this particular area because of the flooding problems. I've experienced 3 floods since that time, and I had a certificate of elevation done on my property, since I'm in a butter of the property. And my basement, the dam, the Pawtucket Dam is 92.2 feet. That includes the 5-foot flashboards. My basement floor is 92.6. I have 4 inches to deal with. When that water's going over those the flashboards, I'm pumping, and I'm pumping 24/7, and I have been for years because of what's been going on with Enel and the power plant. I'll give you a copy of the certificate of elevation, and I'm sure if you dig down, you will hit water. And at the end of my street, I wanted to know what the elevation was at the end of my driveway, and that was 96.3, and at the corner of Shirley Ave and Malden, it's 95.8. So whatever you do on that small lot of land is going to have an impact on me. You displace any water there, it's coming down to my basement. So that's one issue. The other issue was that land was sold to the Lees in the 80s, and by the city of Lowell. And the intent of selling that piece of property was not to build a house on it. It was to add a property, have a bigger yard for the neighbors. And it wasn't the only piece of property in the city of Lowell that was sold at that time. And now we're fighting to make sure a house isn't built on that property. So all the city councilors have been informed of this, and they're going to try to make some kind of in the future, if they were to sell some property, make sure that there'd be some kind of conditions, or an order of conditions on the property. I've been at this for a long time, and I've been before the city council on this issue before, back in 2000, and it was regarding the flooding problems in the neighborhood. And until these issues are taken care of There should be no building in the area, Clay Pit Brook area. And apparently the city council has approved doing a flood study on I'm not even sure how it goes, it's on Clay Pit Brook, and as far as the flow of it, which has a total impact on this neighborhood, because we get flooded by the brook first, not the Merrimack River. Thank you.
Do you,
And I have a copy of the certificate of
ma'am, if you
relation
could,
for you.
if you could stay up, do you have I'm assuming then that you have somewhat of a basement?
I have a basement,
Okay, and
and the house is 100 years old.
okay, yeah, no, that's fine, and what I'm getting at is obviously you have sump pumps in your,
I have two.
Okay.
They run 24/7.
All right.
And years ago, before, when we had 4-foot boards on the dam, I had no problem. When Enel purchased it, they changed it from 4 feet to 5 feet, and since then, it's been a big problem. Oh, and one other thing. When Mr. Mercier went before the state, I was never notified as an abutter for any meeting for that appeal. I knew nothing about it.
you should talk to an attorney regarding that issue.
Yeah.
I can't tell you one way or another what you should do, but, because that's not our issue here. But you may want to consult with legal advice regarding that particular issue, okay?
Okay, and here's a copy of the certificate.
All right. Well, are you aware of any regulation, because you raise an interesting fact about groundwater and whether or not placement of impervious structures, and I guess Commissioner Beardron sort of may have alluded to this a little bit too, and placement of impervious fill subterranean will displace groundwater. And whether or not there's a standard on that, or whether or not there even should be a standard on that, it's an interesting issue, because, there's flood water that we can observe above grade, and the regulations require compensation, but in certain types of soil, and if this is characterized as very sandy soil, that
It is.
what that does is it allows groundwater to migrate very easily. And if there's displacement of groundwater at that point in time, from the site to off the site, does there have to be compensation for that, or is that, and again, I'm just raising the issue, I don't know the answer to this. Is that something to be concerned with, that placing an impervious structure to it, footings, is displacing now groundwater that never would have migrated onto your property or would have had storage capacity that it no longer has, and now will end up in your basement, in neighbors' basements, in everyone's basements in the floodplain, given the characterization of the soil. Typically, groundwater migrates very slowly, and it rises and abates very slowly. But in sandy soils, the migration of it is much more rapid. It's almost to the same extent as it would be above grade. An interest, whether or not there's, whether or not that's something that the regulations are concerned with or not, I for one can't answer that question. But thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who would like to offer their comments or concerns, either for or against this?
Good evening. I've put my statement of opposition on PowerPoint just because of the complexity. My name is John Hamblett. My address is 495 Varnum Avenue. I serve as co-chair of the Pawtucketville Citizens Council. While Swathy is putting the PowerPoint up, this project is in violation of at least 3 Lowell bylaws. And as a result, the Pawtucketville Citizens Council, in its public meeting of March 3rd, unanimously voted to oppose the proposed development in the floodplain. Thank you. And we'll see if that works. That's good enough. Great. We are respectfully requesting that the project be denied by the Lowell Conservation Commission. We are requesting that the enforcement order be enforced by the city of Lowell. What's it doing? Okay. We are requesting that the enforcement order be enforced by the city of Lowell by setting a timetable for the restoration of the lot. And in addition, we request that the fines be restarted at $300 a day until the remediation of the property has started. Okay, good. This is a fairly extensive history. It goes back to 2005. I'm only going to concentrate on 2 historical events that I think are relevant to tonight's discussion. Swathy? Nothing. Roll it?
So just look at this as a...
Okay. Oh, yeah, barely. Sure.
Technology is great when it works.
I know. So I want to talk a little bit about the historical event of August 2012 and the impact of the violations that occurred. The Conservation Commission is familiar with the 3 violations that occurred on August 23rd, when the trees were cut down without Conservation Commission approval, on August 31st, when more trees were cut down in violation of an enforcement order, and September 4th, when the land was cleared in a second violation of that same enforcement order. But the Lowell Conservation Commission may be unaware of the impact of those violations. Groundwater will be very difficult to find on this lot, is what I just heard. This is January 30th, 2013. Over 70% of the lot is covered with water. 3 weeks ago, over 40% of the lot was covered with water. We had 1 3/4 inches of rain. The impact of those violations 2 years ago have been significant on this neighborhood. The second historical event that I wanted to spend some time on was the appeal, if I can get the right button. I have no idea what that is. Can you tell me what's happened, Swathy? It just went blank. I have a zip drive if you want it. And it's right on the main directory. It was on that main directory, probably. Same name. Yeah, great. Okay, what am I aiming at now? It's not there anymore. Okay, great. That's what I know how to do. The other historical event I wanted to refer to was the second appeal, a superseding order of conditions. The first appeal was in the summer of 2012, right about the time they found that loophole in the law from a previous law that had been grandfathered. That was withdrawn. I'm now talking about the appeal from the December notice of intent filing. We've had 4 or 5 notice of intents on this. This is from the December notice of intent. And I think it's crucial as people refer to that to understand that there was no technical reason for that appeal. It's not that the plan was unsatisfactory or the measurements are inappropriate. The fact is that Mr. Erickson filed the wrong abutters list with his notice of intent. And DPD made a big mistake. They offered to help him by pointing out that he had the wrong abutters list, and in doing so did not put him on the agenda. By not putting him on the agenda, we violated the 21-day public hearing. And as are his rights under 310 CMR 10.055, he appealed for a superseding order of conditions because it hadn't been heard within 21 days of submission. I'm hoping that tonight you're going to offer the same courtesy to Mr. Mercier. We're hoping for a denial tonight. This has been covered. The foundation plans are invalid. I'm going to take away that first one that says not integrated with construction plans, and I'm going to replace that with Mr. Erickson's testimony. The structural engineer doesn't know anything about the Wetlands Protection Act, and it shows. There is no consideration for a water table or for this in the floodplain. We submitted 3 questions to the engineer on Monday. He failed to respond. We also sent a copy to Lisa DeMeo. She included some of those in her memo of April 22nd. But the questions that we asked included, A, the parcel was very wet, and the general notes mention that the soil must have a bearing capacity of 3,000 pounds per square foot. It is my understanding in most instances, soil bearing capacity is affected when soil is wet. What changes would be required to the plans if the soil is wet and/or the water table is near the surface? There is no answer. Our second question.
All right, Mr. Hamlet, if I could interrupt you, I appreciate you raising those issues with us, but the structural and pounds per square foot and the support of the soils are not within the jurisdictional purview of our commission. They are to the extent that they are, that the structure is suitable to be placed in, but the technical details are for the city engineer, and that's why we were requesting that the type of structure, the type of supports and footings would be the type that the city engineer, that the expert, and that's their jurisdiction, would be likely to approve. And from the comments that the city engineer gave us back, they're saying, to me at least, in simple English, no.
I'm being repetitive.
So, I mean, and I know you want to speak, and I know that there's no hearing process before the city engineer, but I'd like to limit our purview to stuff that we actually can do something about.
Okay. The summary of this, no, you may not. I'm sorry, I've been working on this for 2 years. You can just hold your horses. The overriding concern is that if, as a result of wet soil, the structure sinks, if it sinks 1 foot, this now becomes wetlands regulation. It now becomes fill in the floodplain. So I think the foundation plans are very valid to even our local city bylaws in regarding to fill in the floodplain. So the first violation is Lowell Code Section 280-1. The preamble is very, very similar to Mass DEP's as far as storm damage prevention. The fail-in foundation that's been presented fails to prevent storm damage. It doesn't take into account wet soil, it doesn't take into account flooding. There are a number of inaccuracies that have already been pointed out. The previous foundation definitely was found insufficient by Lisa DeMayo, the city engineer, and it failed to prevent storm damage. So the 2 plans have been submitted, both fail to meet a local Lowell bylaw 280-1. The compensatory flood storage plan is inadequate. Violation number 2, that's Lowell Code Section 280-9. The use of that historical mound is absolutely disallowed. There is no question about it. This was brought up at the superseding order of conditions proceedings last year, and we submitted several historical maps showing the elevations of the parcels that prove the mound had not been present. Even Mr. Erickson's plans showed on revision number 4, you have a series of revisions at the bottom of the plans. On number 4, there was no mound, and on number 5, it appeared. Even in the Google map that he submitted as proof to Mass DEP, there was no mound. Representations that there were mature trees growing from the mound are simply untrue. I just ask you to go look for yourself. However, Mass DEP clearly, they couldn't be any clearer, they disallowed the mound. In the cover letter of the superseding order of conditions on May 8th, a representative from Mass DEP did a second site inspection on March 6th. This is a quote, with the sole purpose of assessing the mounded area. As a result of Mass DEP's site inspection, your, Mr. Mercier's representative, was notified through a telephone call that the historic existence of the mounded area could not be determined with any certainty. The 529 cubic feet of compensatory flood storage does not include the 159 cubic feet of material proposed to be removed from the mounded area, as Mass DEP is not accepting that location as compensatory flood storage for the site. I don't think it can be any clearer. There are new compensatory calculations for the new foundation. They now have no ability to create flood storage above the 95 or 96 foot level, and therefore these plans are in violation of Lowell Bylaw 280-9. The third violation is Lowell Ordinance 9.1.5 floodway. Just a little bit of background. The National Flood Insurance Program requires municipalities to adopt National Flood Insurance Program laws. And we do that so that we can get flood insurance. And therefore, Article 9, Section 1 in the Book of Ordinances has a duplication of many of the National Flood Insurance Program laws. They define floodway, and this is not the federal definition or the state definition, this is Lowell's definition, as the channel of a river or other watercourse and the adjacent land areas that must be reserved in order to discharge the base flood without cumulatively increasing the water surface elevation. That's the floodplain. Floodplain equals floodway in the city of Lowell by the definitions in our own book of ordinances. And in 2010, after the horrendous floods of 2006 and 2007, City Council did something about it. 9.1.5.2 in Zone AE, along watercourses that have not had a regulatory floodway designated, no new construction, substantial improvement, or other development shall be permitted. So you have two kinds of floodways. You have the regulatory floodways that are shown on the firm maps with a little blue dotted line. And you can see them along the Merrimack River, and you can see them along some of the canals. Some of the canals are designated floodways. And then you have a whole series of another kind of floodway. It's not regulatory, and it's for all the small rivers and streams, because FEMA can't map all the small rivers and streams. And so, along watercourses that have not had a regulatory floodway designated, and that's Clay Pit Brook, no new construction, substantial improvement, or other development shall be permitted. Now, fortunately, Mr. Erickson confirmed that this parcel was in the Clay Pit Brook floodplain in his March 4th, 2013 testimony to Mass DEP, when he stated the study showed that flooding in this area results primarily from flow in the Clay Pit Brook. In summary, we are requesting for a project denial, and that should be rationale. I wanted to give the rationale for why we are requesting immediate restoration right now. On the left, you can see that's from the assessor's database. The land was purchased for $8,000. On the right, it went up for sale last June for $57,900. That's the lot. The parcel's for sale without a house on it. And we don't believe that the builder, the owner, has any intention of building. What he wants is with your blood, sweat, and tears and ours, he wants an order of conditions to make that $8,000 piece of property worth $58,000. Well, when that happens, we have a new owner, and it all starts over again. So, while the ethical implications of that kind of transaction are not relevant from a practical standpoint, we could be looking at this problem again in 6 months. We respectfully request that you deny the project, and we request that remediation begin immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Hamblett?
I have copies of the presentation for everybody and
Yes, thank you.
references.
Is there anyone else who would like to offer their comments or concerns, either for or against? Is there anyone else who would like to offer their comments or concerns, either for or against? Is there anyone else who would like to offer their comments or concerns, either for or against? All right, hearing no other comments or concerns, we have a couple of things going on now. We have a request to issue a denial, and we have open questions from the commission to the applicant regarding revisions to the plan. I think, for me, at least at this time, we got to be thinking, well, I don't want to tell you how to think, but for me, I'm thinking, is this something I can reconcile, assuming we get favorable information back. I think I would like to see the DEP's to this, at this point in time, I haven't seen the DEP's order of conditions. And if they're disallowing the use of the mounded area, then Mr. Erickson, you have a serious problem, because you can't provide compensation on this site for what you're proposing to do. Whether you can answer the city engineer's questions and our questions or not. To me, from the presentation that I just saw, I mean, I'd issue a denial right now if it came for a vote.
Copy of that superseding order of conditions letter?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should have it, but I haven't seen it yet. So,
I just copied it. Right.
yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I mean, this has been going on, and it's been going on, and it's been going on, and it's been going on, but I've also been doing this a long time, and this isn't rocket science, and if you don't have anywhere on your site that you can provide compensation, you have to be looking off-site, and we don't have to entertain that either. That's not something we have to give you the leeway and say, you know, we'll continue it and see if you can find it. You know, if the DEP says you can't use it, there's no way you can provide compensation above those elevations, and you have to provide compensation above those elevations. So, you know, I just give me a second. You know, as I said, I haven't seen this yet, and I'd like to read it. I don't know if I'll pass it around, but. Do you, yeah, I for one haven't seen it, I just did, but do you have anything to say to that?
Not at this time.
All right,
We will respond to it, though.
well,
Could we get a continuance for 1 month?
you know, right now, I'm either gonna, whatever the motion is, the motion will be for a continuance or for to more substantive, but do I have a motion? Just give us a second, because I think people wanna review this, so let's, when everyone's had a chance to read it. What I just read, Mr. Erickson, is, and I don't know if those plans were the ones that exhibit 4 and 5, but it's kind of curious that the mound was on one of them and not on the other one. But regardless of that fact, the inability to use it at those elevations, you know, as I said, you're kind of stuck here. And you're stuck at a certain elevation, and there's nowhere on that site that you can provide compensation up to the 100-year flood elevation if you can't use that mounded area. And the DP's not letting you use it, and there's evidence that the mound was not a pre-existing condition. Maybe there was a little bit there around a tree stump, but I don't know. I mean, even your own plan showed it not there. And now we're using it for compensation, so, or trying to.
So I have a question. The superseding order of conditions says that it does meet the performance standards for the borderland subject to flooding, but then it says that they do not count that mound. So is the DEP just not concerned about storage? Or were calculations maybe different then? Because the superseding order of conditions is, it's what?
There is no de minimis filling in a floodplain. I'll tell you
Yeah.
that right now. The DEP issued a superseding denial on a project for a wheelbarrow full for us recently. There is no, I don't care whether they said de minimis or not, because formal action that they've taken, there is no such thing as de minimis. Well, that's your say-so, but the DEP has been denying wheelbarrows full of fill. Okay, so there is no de minimis, and especially in a neighborhood like this, a wheelbarrow full is significant, and it's the cumulative effect. It's not this particular wheelbarrow full, and this is way more than a wheelbarrow full. It's the cumulative effect. It's this property, it's the next property, it's the next project, and it's the thousands of projects before it. And you know, there's the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, and I'm not saying that this is it or not, but the falling back on the de minimis, as I said, the DEP, there was a project a couple of 100 yards away from this that we had last year, that the DEP issued a superseding denial on, and the fill was significantly less than this. So they issued it. They issued an approval without understanding what the fills were.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting out of that.
Mr. Chairman, just a clarifying question based on what I'm reading in here. It says a total of 30 cubic feet of borderland subject to flooding is proposed to be displaced for building support structures, with 529 cubic feet of compensatory flood storage provided through overall site grading. The 529 cubic feet of compensatory flood storage does not include the 159 feet of material proposed to be removed from the mounded area, as Mass DEP is not accepting that location as compensatory flood storage for the site. If I'm reading this correctly, it sounds like there may be the overall compensatory storage is acceptable, but because it's not within the right elevations and they don't have, and you can't use the mound to get credit for that elevation, it's not a matter of not having sufficient storage, it's at the right elevations, correct?
Right.
Okay.
That's, yeah, I mean, what the DEP did was just took the total fill
Without looking at the
without
individual
looking at the
foot increments.
individual foot-by-foot elevations,
All right,
correct.
thank you.
And as I said, once you get north of, once you get north of the 95, 96 contour, they're stuck, because there's nothing on that site, there's nothing on that site that is going to give you compensation. All right, has everyone had an opportunity to look at that? All right, so either, I mean, I don't have a motion yet, so.
I'll make a motion.
All right.
I'd like to move to deny this project tonight. I think we've reviewed it sufficiently, and from what we have before us, it seems that the site has a lack of proper compensation, that it's, and from the presentation that we saw, that it appears to be in violation of several city ordinances concerning storm damage and the building in a floodway. This neighborhood has suffered over and over again, and I just can't imagine that this is a proper place for a home. So I think we've reviewed it sufficiently. We've given meeting after meeting of opportunity to understand the project, and I still can't see that it meets our requirements. So that's the basis of my motion to deny.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Varnum, second by Commissioner Lynch, open for discussion. Just want to clarify, is it part of your motion for the denial that, can we be specific on your motion as to the specific reasons for the denial?
The presence of the proposal to build in the floodplain area of a floodway, which definitely was proven to be such in the 2006 and 2007 floods, as well as seasonal flooding. The lack of compensation on a foot-by-foot basis if the mound is not allowed, as the DEP has led the way in stating that it is not. And the threat of storm damage due to increased density of building in the floodplain. We don't know, and this is one thing we haven't finished with the foundation plan, but without compensation, we almost don't need to go any further with understanding the foundation plan. But the foundation plan doesn't take into account that the waters may rise, or there may be a current of a certain force against these piers.
So is it part of your motion then, let me just understand, is part of your motion then that the commission should not, as did the DEP, consider the mounded area as suitable for compensatory storage? And
That's correct.
all right,
I never felt that the mound was anything but something that was dumped there fairly recently myself.
all right, okay. All right, we have a second. Any further discussion?
I'm just concerned that he does have 529 cubic feet with the grade. Correct?
No, well,
The mound is 159.
say that again?
He's getting his 529 cubic feet with his grade. That's why the DEP said that they issued this. So mine is not including the 159 cubic feet.
Right, from what I understand from the DEP's comments, and and Commissioner Lovely raised this, there's a subtle distinction here, and that is if you look at it in its entirety, there's 159 cubic feet of filling.
No, I'm not even talking about the mound. That's the 159.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, there's 159 cubic feet of compensation from the mounding area, which
Minus that, he's getting 529 cubic feet due to his grade.
yes, but not at the correct elevations. It's tantamount to digging a hole in the ground, okay? They still need to provide compensation at the correct elevations, and there's nothing on that site above the elevation 96 that they can provide compensation for. And the 100-foot elevation is 100.2, so they need to provide between 96 and 100.2, and they can't do it without using the mounded area. There's, to me, satisfactory evidence that the mounded area either did not exist or should not be used. From information I'm hearing from members of the commission, the DEP, and and neighbors who've lived in this area. Beyond that, I just make a comment. To me, the mounded area is unnatural. Mounds just don't sort of grow like that in the middle of a flat area without having been intentionally placed there. Notwithstanding that, is there any further discussion? All right. I think the motion has specified specifics as for it. All in favor of the motion signify by saying yea or nay. Commissioner Lovely?
Aye.
Commissioner Varnum?
Aye.
Chair is yes. Commissioner Lynch?
Aye.
Commissioner Beardron?
Aye.
The ayes have it. The project is denied under the city ordinance. Yes.
The status of the enforcement order?
Yeah. We do have the issue of the outstanding enforcement order. Mr. Erickson, you may want to, we're not done yet, unless you want us to issue another enforcement order.
I have something to say about the
Yeah. Under the existing enforcement order, we'd like to see we don't need to take any motion on it. We'd like to see the site restored in due haste. Okay, we're not going to give you a lot of leeway.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Commissioner Varnum.
I was accepting of the planting plan were there to be a house put on the site, but in lieu of there not being a house put on the site, there are several more trees that need to be planted across the center of the lot. You have, I believe, 8 trees on the planting plan, and I believe there were, I'd have to look back in the files, but I believe there were about 20 trees taken down. So that 8 would have to be augmented with additional trees across the middle of the lot where the house was proposed.
Yeah, well, we had a plan, I think Swati had developed it in association with Mr. Erickson and Mr. Mercia there was a remediation plan that's already been put on file that you proposed with Swati and was accepted by the commission as part of the enforcement order to abate further fines going forward. What I would suggest is that you start doing that this week or next week and getting those trees established. We're holding a bond. Funds in the bond can, as we had indicated before, can be used to pay those invoices. Once they're established, you can submit your invoices to the city for release of the bond money to do that. Okay. I don't think there needs to be, it's already in an outstanding enforcement order. The project has been denied. The enforcement order will continue, and we expect the site to be remediated in due haste. Okay, and that's regardless of whether you take an appeal or not. Okay. What I would suggest that you tell Mr. Mercia is that, if we're not seeing any, and I'll raise it myself and request that it be put on the agenda for our next meeting. If we're not seeing any project on the site, we'll be entertaining resuming fines on the site and forfeiture of the bond. All right, moving on, we have minutes, a bunch of minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I, for one, haven't had the chance to review them all.
Nor have I, so.
If it pleases the commission, I'd like to see if we could postpone that to the next.
All right, we have a motion to postpone the approval of the minutes on the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Commissioner Beardron. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
By Commissioner Lovely.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lynch. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. And good night.
Thank you.